Ladies and gentlemen, Manchester United might be in the middle of a very long break from football, but that doesn't mean we have to be starved of Shaun and Phil's weekly counselling sessions. How's everything with you, my friend?
All good, mate. All good. I see they've had a big increase in budget. You must be filming this on location in Gran Canaria, judging by that big orange thing outside your window there.
How utterly phenomenal is that? Not only did I manage the first cut, I got the second cut on the grass. This is unprecedented stuff here. You know that yourself, pal.
What type of, are you getting that from Mexico, or are you getting that, what type of grass? Oh, grass, that grass. Oh, sorry.
You caught me out. You caught me out. My man, it's been a couple of days, and unfortunately, we weren't able to get onto this immediately after the game, but sometimes our family lives dictate when we are able to sit down and have a chat, people. But Manchester United drew 2-2 with Bournemouth. Difficult game, and a lot to unpack with it, not only from officiating, but down to managerial decisions and individual performances from players. But the long and the short of it, after another weekend of Premier League football, is that we have got a point on Villa, 6 on Liverpool, 7 on Chelsea, with 7 games to play. All things considered, Phil, it's a pretty good situation to be in for Michael Carrick and Manchester United right now.
Yeah, 100%. It's a situation, we say this every week, you would have taken when he first took over. You know, you judge each game on its merits, and that's a game that will sit long on the craw. It's a game that is going to have provoke memories for different reasons. If you look at it by itself, we'll get to obviously all the key controversial moments in that game, but you look at the results over the weekend. I mean, that really is the key point: is does anyone have the consistency to catch United? And look at the teams around United. No, you don't really fear anyone, do you? And I felt that if United won this game, Champions League qualification was virtually guaranteed, in my opinion. But I also felt, and I know people will not believe me when I say this, but maybe I did say this on our podcast right before the game Wednesday, that a draw wasn't a terrible result, and it wasn't a result where it should lead to people questioning Michael Carrick. Even though I'm disappointed we drew the game.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure we did discuss that. And all things considered, Phil, we came into that game and Bournemouth were 10 games unbeaten. They had the best record in the Premier League in terms of longevity without actually suffering defeat. I might have the date wrong now, but I think it was January the 3rd was the last time they lost the game against Arsenal. That's fantastic. And
the same statistician told you, said United hadn't won there in 6 years. Just I'll have to question.
I did have a bit of a mare with that one. I don't know what happened there. Like, I'm usually on top of these things, but I don't know. It was late in the day. I was tired. It was all of those things considered, and I'm not going back on it. But like, January the 3rd is a serious thing. And you see, this is something that we've become accustomed to with Bournemouth in recent seasons. They're an above average team. They play very good football. They have to come to terms with losing players kind of every so often. But they have a very good manager. He's a very good tactician. And to go 10 games unbeaten and now 11 games unbeaten, it's testament to the good work that they have with players like Alex Scott. You know, very, very good footballers in there. But that said, you know, it was another performance that, where do we start? Performances officiating. I think it's probably you look at the officiating, because if the official does not make the incorrect decision, the entire dynamic of the fixture changes, because momentum and everything shifts. The first penalty award on Matheus Cunha, it is a penalty, like clear as day. It's a penalty. Maybe he was a little bit theatrical in the way he drew himself down, but the defender gave him the option to be able to do that. When you look at the second one, a couple of minutes later against Ahmed, like, there was no attempt whatsoever to play the ball. And even by the way that Ahmed fell over and the way he landed on the football, you can see it wasn't this natural thing that he had thrown himself down. This was the result of a bigger, larger defender forcefully throwing him to the ground. And if that penalty is given, you can't say Bruno is going to score or going to miss. We don't know, because it never happened. But by the law of averages, Bruno is going to score. And then all of a sudden, Bournemouth are 2 down. They're coming up against a team that are riding the crest of a wave throughout Carrick's tenure. And you can't see Manchester United giving away a 2-goal lead there, can you?
Look, the first one's a penalty. And when we talk about theatrical diving, There's a reason for that, because you get punished if you stay on your feet. It just that's a fact. There are so many times where I've seen United players too honest go through, get taken down, try to stay on their feet, try to finish the chance, and you don't get the decision. So referees are encouraging that, first of all, because they're not, no one's getting a penalty unless you go to ground. When was the last time you saw somebody get a penalty for, unless you're talking about from a corner where someone's holding, and even then it's very rare. If you're talking about something from open play, I can't remember the last time somebody got a penalty for contact in the box who stayed on their feet. I mean, it just never happens. So, and who are we to say that what is an acceptable, level of contact for a player to go down? I mean, these are players that are running at full pace. It doesn't take much. And so I think that's a very subjective opinion about what is, I understand football is officiated like that. You see that all over the pitch. What is an acceptable level of contact? What isn't? But the second one, you can almost see it happening in real time, Shaun. The thought process of Stuart Atwell going, no way I'm giving a second penalty. We were close proximity to each other. I'm not dealing with the media fallout. And, we talk about what Bruno might not have scored. Well, at the very least, Bournemouth wouldn't have scored if that's given, right? And then you see it go up the other end of that pitch. And as soon as that ball goes in, there's no way, because now the decision becomes even bigger. And there's no way VAR is calling that goal back. Given the penalty, they're going to back their colleague up on the field, compound the error. You see the problem with VAR. Forget about bias towards Manchester United or against. Just look at it from a human aspect for a minute, right? And Stuart Atwell, by the way, I'm being very, maybe I'm being unduly fair to him here in a way that maybe he doesn't deserve. Very collegial in my appraisal of him and saying that let's assume he doesn't have bias. Once a human being looks at VAR, where you're getting 15, 20 seconds to make a decision, as we've said before, that human being is going to consider variables that have nothing to do with the decision itself. And one of them is, how's the media going to react? This is going to be another situation where there's going to be undue focus. Sky Sports will be holding seances and stuff all week about what that should have been given, and contacting referees from, the past, and contacting the Russian linesman who gave the goal in 66 and asking how, all this stuff, right? Because it's United and it requires that level of scrutiny. It's a clear penalty. There's no other decision that you can give. And the arrogance of the officials, how dare you even question us or ask us what we gave? I mean, that is something that does need to be addressed. We're going to take 5 minutes to make a decision. We don't care about the game. We don't care about anything because we are in control. This is what happens when you have people who write rules for games that have never played it. That goal should never have happened. Now, Shaun, if you look at what United were in control of, which was really disappointing, by the way, is their reaction to that decision. So Ahmad doesn't get the penalty. The first thing you see is Cunha with a very lethargic response, like, Cunha's 2 yards away, foul him, and force the decision. If you foul a Bournemouth player right there, VAR happens immediately. Don't allow a big gap between that decision and VAR making this decision, because the longer the gap, the less likely it is you're going to get that decision. United players didn't press the ball at all. They stood off almost expecting VAR to call it back, and Bournemouth go up the other end and score. And the second goal happens exactly the same way. They didn't heed the warning right before that from Alex Scott that hit the bar, came through the midfield. Casemiro throwing out a lazy leg. Kobbie Mainoo, great in possession, but not so great out of possession. Same thing happened against Newcastle. We're very low tempo pressing the ball. Look at how Bournemouth players pressed the ball when United had it. They were on top of them immediately. That's not how United were defending. The second goal happens from United not pressing the ball. It came from a penalty, but no question about it, the biggest influential factor on that game was the referee, and that shouldn't be happening.
Before you get into the performances in greater detail, out of curiosity's sake, let's say Bournemouth don't go up the other end and score immediately. Do you think either the referee awards a penalty or VAR tells them to go and have a look at it? even just considering that it's a couple of minutes after the first one has been awarded, if there's no variable whereby Bournemouth have scored, do you think he goes back on himself and awards a penalty in that particular case?
I don't know, because again, I still think there's just, this is a natural human instinct to try to protect your colleague, and knowing there's controversy there, it's a clear penalty, Shaun. If United are 3-0 up in that game, then yes, I think it gets pulled back. There was no desire to give United a second penalty. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm jumping to wrong conclusions, but it looked to me 100% like they just didn't want to give United a second penalty, knowing that it was going to cause all types of controversy. But I think United are far too nice about these things. One thing I didn't like about Jurgen Klopp, when Liverpool would have a VAR decision against them, or Arne Slot saying people should look at that and see it's Liverpool and think we don't do those types of things. United are so docile when it comes to this, and they are far too accepting of these decisions. Oh, we'll talk to the PGMOL. 2 weeks from now, we'll get some apology that's hidden in the bottom corner of some publication that nobody reads, that nobody pays attention to, and it'll happen again. No, this needs to be something United need to make a big deal out of. There's a pervasive myth out there that United get all sorts of decisions from referees and officials. This is just not true, of course. Because nobody pays attention to the ones they don't get. It's almost like they deserve not to get them, but as soon as they get a decision, it's dubious. I mean, they talk about Dallo and the derby as if that was an obvious straight red. It wasn't an obvious straight red to me. To me, that's very easily a yellow card. And I look at Stuart Outwell's officiating record against United. It certainly raises big questions, Shaun.
I look at it, and it's something that I tweeted about afterwards. I'm privileged enough to have gone through a generation like you where we had Pierluigi Collina. He was a referee that you knew his name because he deserved you to know his name. The man was a legend. There's no world where we should know the names of a dozen or more English referees.
Yeah,
and it's just this constant byproduct of individuals wanting to make themselves the center of attention at every given opportunity. I accept the point that technology is not the issue. It's the individuals behind the technology that's the issue. And on a weekly basis, when you have different individuals manning that technology, you're going to have a different outcome because everybody is susceptible to human thought and opinion. And I grace that. That's perfectly fine. But in this particular situation, you're looking at a factor whereby that second penalty decision that never happened, if that's up the other end, 100% it's a penalty. And it all comes down to the byproduct of the referee looking at the situation and saying, if I give this penalty now, not only am I going to have to deal with the immediate media fallout, but the game is over as a spectacle. And there's still so much of it yet to be played.
Mm-hmm.
And the referee should not have that decision to make. The referee's decision is not to decide the outcome of a game. The referee's decision is not to decide whether the home supporters are going to like it or not. His decision and his goal is to be able to referee it and officiate in a fair manner. And I think it speaks leaps and bounds when you've got somebody like Dermot Gallagher coming out and saying, yeah, it was a penalty and it should have been a penalty, because he will go. He did, yeah.
Thankfully.
Now, unless this has somehow gone by me totally wrong,
I listened to Mike Dean say the opposite, and I'm going, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, like there's no stance to it. And look, I know there's been certain journalists from esteemed publications that have come out and actually jeered the fact that United would feel aggrieved by a decision going against them. But at the end of the day, this is a clear factor that occurred in that game. If that penalty is awarded as it should have been, United don't concede that goal. Whether or not they scored is irrelevant, but by the law of averages, as I've said, Bruno scores, United are 2-0 up, United go on, they win that game, that's 3 points, and all of a sudden the gap stays as it is on Villa, and it's increased on Liverpool and Chelsea, which further emphasises the fact that Manchester United are on the cusp of returning back to Champions League football. As a result, we are now falling foul to another referee's decision. And it's another moment where another individual who should have no place in the papers after it is what we are discussing right now. You see, that said, though, if you move past it, you do have a lot of credence in what you were saying about individual performances, because a reaction is a perfectly viable thing to discuss. You're perfectly right in what you're saying. You have to play the referee's decision. you play the referee's whistle, don't you? This is something you're
Oh,
taught from a
definitely when you're a
very,
child.
very young age.
Hmm.
You don't stand around and expect that something is going to change just because you fire your hands up in the airs about it. And ultimately, United do have to be held accountable for that. But it's not necessarily just the ramifications of how they reacted after the decision, Phil. There's a lot that needs to be pulled back about individual performances during that game, because what was United being more or less on top in the first half without any real sort of quality there in the final third, Bournemouth came far out above it on the second half. They were the better team. They asked more questions. And ultimately, I know there was decisions such as Harry Maguire sending off that changed the outcome of what we were looking at in terms of tempo and possession. But there was a lot of individual questions that need to be asked about players in this team. I don't know whether that comes back to squad depth and the lack of it, or the fact that there was only 5 days in between fixtures. But it was far from a stellar performance from this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not expecting United to have exceptional performances where that are much greater than what they are, because I don't think United are that much better than what we're seeing. And there's definitely a concern about energy levels. What disappointed me was United in the last 20 minutes never looked like a team that really wanted to win that game. They looked like a team that was playing for a draw. Even whenever Bournemouth equalised, you looked at the urgency with which United got the ball back into play when there was free kicks. And then I hear Michael Carrick at the end of the game complaining about the length of injury time. I'm going, I don't know, why would that be a problem? I understand we're down to 10 men, but you should still be trying to win that game. You should see that as an opportunity to win the game. I mean, to me, that's still a very winnable game, even down to 10 men. It's a small pitch. You can stay compact. You can find a way to win that game of football. That's what top teams do. And that attitude to me contributed to United conceding equalizers where, they out of possession, there's just not enough pressure on the ball. I saw a couple of times Bruno Fernandes chasing balls back, screaming at his midfield, going, "Where are you?" Because they were backing off. And I'm going, I've seen this before. And you're inviting that pressure on. And I don't understand how United press. I was frustrated with Mbeumo first half. Look, he's a guy that really looks like he needs a rest. His form is poor, but the lethargy with which he was pressing at made it really easy to beat the first press, to beat the line. I watched Evan Nielsen pressing United's defenders in the 91st minute like it was the first minute, and I go, why can't we do that? Fine if you can't play exceptionally well. Fine if you're playing with 10 men. Fine if you don't trust that midfield with Agarty in it when he comes on. We're gonna have a good discussion about that. But that energy level, you're not playing football, lads. I mean, you're not playing 3 games a week. There's no reason why you can't reciprocate with that type of energy.
Now, it's a good point that you brought this up, and it's something that I did want to speak about. You've mentioned Mbeumo specifically and what he did and did not do and how it's a continuation of his form. This can be drawn back to before the ball was even kicked that day and about the selection that Carrick made in the starting 11. Because ultimately, when you pin it back, Brian Mbeumo was put on, and yes, he did not have his best performance by a long shot, but he was being asked to do something against an opposition that did not suit the way he plays football, Phil. Brian Mbeumo was asked to go up and essentially play Benjamin Sesko's role. And you're talking about a guy that's 5'8", whereas Benjamin Sesko is what, 6'4"? And we see a situation where Senna Lamens spends how much of the game launching long balls up as if we have a big target man at that number 9 position to be able to hold up play, to be able to use a physicality to offset what is a high press from a Bournemouth back line. And ultimately, the statistics don't look good for Brian Mbeumo. But I do think it's a little bit unfair, not disingenuous on your part, but disingenuous from a general collective to think that Mbeumo was poor, did not complete his instructions, when he was maybe being asked to fall into this old adage of a square peg into a round hole. And that comes further back then onto Carrick and the selection, and something that I've been saying to you for weeks about at what point it's going to fall foul on him by utilizing this ideology that if it's not broken, don't fix it. It might be okay to use that interchangeable front line against Aston Villa the week before that, Phil. But just because it worked against Aston Villa does not mean that it's going to work against Bournemouth. And it was quite clear the way they were going to line up. It was quite clear the way they were going to play. And it was quite clear from the off that Benjamin Sesko was a far more suitable option to go into that front line instead of Brian Mbeumo. Now, all being well, if you want to put Mbeumo on the bench in place of Ahmad on the right wing, that's perfectly fine. But when you're sticking Mbeumo up top instead of an out-and-out striker who could fulfill the role that you're trying to lay out in the first place, surely that has to fall back on the manager.
I would disagree because I think Mbeumo's been poor for a while. I think he cost United the game against Newcastle. He had a gilt edge opportunity that he should have taken, that he skied, put well over the bar, wasn't difficult. I remember the ball into his feet. And if he had a left foot, he takes that ball first time. Instead, he wants to control it, turns, come across the box. I think he's an exceptional player. I just don't think he's playing particularly well. At Old Trafford against Villa, I remember the ball coming across the box. He had a shot that went out for a throw. This looks nothing like the Brian Mbeumo, because he's playing against teams that also play high lines where he's suited to being played in behind. I just don't think he's like Ahmad has looked. I know he scored against Arsenal. He scored against City too, but after the Arsenal game, he just has looked a shadow of his former self. Maybe the guy just needs a rest. Same with Ahmad, that I feel like those levels have dropped. And Ahmad gets in good opportunities, gets in good positions, but always seems to hit a defender or it never seems to hit the back of the net. It is just going through one of these stages. I'm not criticizing him as a player. He's a human being, but I just feel that, there's a noticeable difference when Sesko plays and when Mbeumo plays. There was a noticeable difference when Sesko played and Mbeumo played at the start of the season of who undoubtedly was the more effectual player. I just feel that he has lost a bit of confidence, which is normal. He's a human being. And some of his work off the ball, I just am not impressed with. But again, that may be because he needs a rest. I can't, if I'm going to hold Carrick accountable for anything, it's that I would have held him off at halftime.
I understand that. And as I said, there is credence in looking at the situation over a number of game weeks, but just focusing on this game alone, this is something I published earlier on. Now, I don't have the figure to a T in my head, but Lamans attempted in the mid-30s with long balls. Okay, so we'll say about 34 or 35. He completed 44% of those.
Yeah.
And the variable on that is the fact that he didn't have a Benjamin Sesko style outlet in his number 9 to reach them.
I would agree with.
And then when you look at it from Mbeumo's side, Mbeumo had 34 touches of the ball. And I believe he misplaced or lost possession 13 times. And I think a lot of that comes down to the byproduct of being asked to fulfill a role that he's not totally comfortable in doing. Absolutely. And that then can fall back on the lack of confidence that you're discussing.
Yeah, maybe. And, I don't know.
There's no correct science to this. I'm not saying that what I'm saying is correct and what you're saying is incorrect. I'm just saying I think there's a broader conversation to be had about it. And, it's something I've discussed for a long time with you. We're looking far more at this interchangeable line up to the point where Dorgu was injured. You saw Patrick Dorgu on the left. You saw Mbeumo on the right. You saw Bruno in the 10 and Mbeumo as a striker. When Dorgu got injured, Cunha came into the team. And there's only been 2 times in the 10 fixtures that Carrick made an intentional substitution that wasn't forced as an injury. And that was taking out Ahmad and bringing in Benjamin Sesko. And Sesko didn't score then against Newcastle, and he was brought back onto the substitute bench, and Ahmad was restored. I just think it's something that we need to look at. I know that we don't have the massive quality in abundance, Phil, but there's players there that can offer something slightly different. And if it's not for injuries, we're just not seeing the squad management come from Carrick. And even though I'm a massive supporter as to what he's doing, and I do think he's the standout candidate because he's doing so well in his dress rehearsal, the lack of impetus in terms of making tactical tweaks is something that needs to be brought into the fore, I think.
I think that he has a problem in that he has very little tactical tweaks available to him because of the limitations of the squad. I mean, you can see that he knows he needs legs going into the last 20 minutes of midfield, but he knows that those legs are Manuel Ugarte and he doesn't want to bring them on, right? And he gets to a point where he's forced to bring them on. He brings them on, I think, when United conceded the equaliser because of the fact that Bournemouth were just walking through United's midfield. this is where I think that Kobe Manu maybe needs to do a bit more out of possession, and maybe there's something in that criticism that Ruben Amorim had of him. You don't worry about Kobe in possession, but out of possession, sometimes you're a young lad. You should be all over that pitch. And maybe I'm totally wrong on that assessment. It's just what it looks like to me from the naked eye at home, where I'm like, I don't see that type of energy off the ball. Carrick, when you could see him against Newcastle, doesn't want to bring Manuel Ugarte on the pitch, but he doesn't have the options available to him. I think he doesn't like starting with Sesko, because if he does, it doesn't give them a tremendous amount of alternatives to change the game. If United are not doing well, if it's a tight game, how do you change the game? How do you give the opposition a different look? If you've already started with Sesko, you bring him off, and maybe they've already dealt with the biggest threats. They've lined up with the expectation of dealing with Sesko from the start. Then you're trying to bring on maybe an Mbeumo or an Ahmad, and you lose something down the middle. I mean, if you look at that Villa game, how many times did we see in the first half United attacking good positions, ball come across the box, and the closest forward we had to the last defender was a couple of yards off them, because they're not out and out strikers. Excuse me. So you do lose something with him not starting, but you have very little ability to change a game if you do start with him.
Yeah, it's a fair point. You start with Sesko, you have a clear out and out number 9 who's going to be used as an out ball to allow the wide players to run past him. But then at the same time, if you want to make a switch after 60, 65 minutes and take Sesko off, you bring on a player who has the capabilities to feature anywhere across the front line, and it allows interchangeability. And there's a lot to be said about that, because Sesko is not going to go and play as a left winger. He's not going to go and play as a right winger. Sesko has one defined style of play. And I do think that it is a factor. It's not something that I'm trying to say is a major downer in Carrick. As I said, I'm a massive supporter of him. You look at it, you've 10 games, you've 1 loss, 2 draws, 7 wins. If you want to bring it back to the previous tenure in 21, he's got like 1 loss and 12 Premier League fixtures. It's outstanding. Absolutely outstanding.
He's not above analysis, Shaun. He's not above criticism. I mean,
of course.
It doesn't matter what he does. He's a professional football manager, and when you're not winning games of football, draws or whatever, you're managing one of the biggest football clubs in the world. No, there's no one above that.
No, 100%. And he's got plenty of time for reflection, because obviously Leeds is what? April the 13th? An absolutely ridiculous wait for football. There is going to be plenty of football going on in the meantime with everyone else, and we saw plenty of it over the weekend. Did you see any of the Carabao Cup final?
I did. I watched it. And in the most predictable sense, Arsenal find a way to lose a game where everything's on the line. There's something deeply wrong with that football club. A mentality of an expectation of defeat. They fear winning trophies, but yeah, I did see it.
It was a very interesting tactical tweak inside in that game, where Pep instructed his entire front four to sit back and not press the defenders. Did you see that?
I wasn't watching it that intensely. I was watching it, and I wasn't really focusing on their tactical lineups. But I noticed how little ball progression forward Arsenal had in that game. And
it was fantastic, man. Because he obviously copped the fact that Arsenal's defense are toothless when they're actually required to do something meaningful with the ball. It comes across as if they're this fantastic distribution team, but he sat them all back, and they must have stayed about 15, 20 yards off them and just said, all right, you got the ball, do something with it. And they had absolutely no answer to the most simplistic of things.
I think they'll win the league because there's no pressure put on them to win pivotal games.
Yeah.
Because if you can accumulate enough points over 38 games to win the league, and it always depends on what the consistency is of the team chasing you. If you have a big gap, Arsenal can afford to lose a pivotal game and still win the league. I think they'll do that. But if you put them in cup finals, Sammy, they fall apart. But in light of United losing against Spurs, I don't think we're in the best position to throw stones at the minute.
Oh God! Every single week they just seem to find another way to make it more perplexing that we managed to lose a European final against them, isn't it?
Watching Arsenal, I every single time I watch them, I'm like, thank God we did not get Jacques and we got Sesko, because usually United end up on the wrong end of those types of transactions.
It's so unfortunate to watch what's happening to that player, isn't it? He just looks so out of his element at that football team. I know we briefly touched on it last week or the week before, but it's like the byproduct of taking a striker and telling him to play in a system that doesn't require a striker. It's hideous watching what's happening to him just from a footballing perspective, isn't it?
I can't say I've lost a single night of sleep over it. Like, as long as it's not United, well, Arsenal, the only downside is you have to deal with that insufferable support. But like Liverpool, in a sense that they can't understand why people don't love them as much as they love themselves.
This is true. And it's nearly better just to use the mute option on social media. Just a couple of keywords you can mute out and you can do yourself very, very good things in that. One thing that you touched on a couple of times and you said we were going to get to it, and I think it's probably fitting we do, is Carrick not having the option to rearrange his midfield over the lack of, we'll say, versatility and capabilities of Manuel Ugarte. We've got several questions that came through here this week. Fantastic. Thank you all so much for getting back, because you did so very quickly as well. It's great to see.
Thank you.
But there was an account on Twitter called, where are we here? There's an account on Twitter that got on about Mr. Ugarte. I had it in front of me and I'm just after. Okay, so it was ADT3 on Twitter. And he said, should Carrick avoid playing Ugarte again before he inevitably leaves this summer? That Bournemouth was another abysmal showing. Now, it was very poor. But if you don't play him again for the remainder of the season, where are you at?
Look, United have to worry about their own season more than what Ugarte is going to be at the end of the season. It just is everything about him is. I mean, I don't like to just repeatedly bully and put the boot into someone, but you're looking at a football player that doesn't look like he belongs at that level. In his slight defense, United are bringing him on in games where, it's late in games. He doesn't have a lot of time. He's not playing a lot of football, trying to adjust to the pace. United are nervy. He's not starting games, but he's terrible in possession. This is the worst time to bring him on because he consistently gives the ball away. He's poor in possession in any capacity, whether he has time on the ball. He worries me every time the ball goes in his general vicinity. And he doesn't really provide anything of, okay, well, we can accept he's poor in possession, but he's good at this or this or this. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that a player just looks so far off what it takes to be a professional footballer at this level. I have a feeling he'll end up going to someone like Fiorentina in Italy and you'll never hear from him again 2-3 years later. He's going to be in the second division in Italy or something, and maybe like a Donny van de Beek or something where you forgot he's playing football, because that's sort of who he reminds me of a bit in terms of his level.
It's so unfortunate because when he was at Sporting, he started
at Ajax.
Yeah, I know. But the thing was, he made that move from Sporting to Paris Saint-Germain, when they had the dressing room full of prima donnas. And within a couple of weeks of him playing in Paris, there was articles going out stating that he was the essential cog that held everything together. And obviously, as you discussed previously, Luis Enrique came in, he didn't fit the style, and Luis Enrique said, okay, you don't have a place here, it's time to move on. Do you think him arriving at Manchester United, do you think what you're seeing is the sole result of having a lack of ability to play at that level, or do you think confidence is just completely shot in him?
No, I think that, if you've got Luis Enrique in France, say one of the main reasons they want to get rid of you is that you're not good enough in possession. I think this predates anything that happens at United. As we've seen, we've just spent a few minutes talking about Gyökeres. You can look good in Portugal, but not look good somewhere else, especially in a team like Sporting that's dominating possession 80% of the time, that's not under that type of pressure you're going to get in top leagues. I'm sure Luis Enrique was judging Manuel Ugarte in the Champions League, not necessarily in Liga, where that type of feeling is going to get punished badly. In midfield, if you can't pass the ball, Shaun, most games are won in midfield, right? And it's the team that makes the fewest mistakes. He's a mistake machine, and you're always having to fix that. So he breaks down possession when you're attacking, when you need a player to put their foot in the ball, when you're chasing a game or you're defending a lead, when you're defending a lead and you're trying to kill a game, I don't understand. He brings a nervousness to the team. Like Onana would bring a nervousness to United's defending. And sure, some of it's confidence, of no doubt. But, Eric Ten Hag desperately did not want him. I was with them in the States when that whole deal was happening. And McTominay's doing exceptionally well at Napoli. I'm not certain that getting rid of McTominay was something United I still think that was the right thing to do, because Scott McTominay at Manchester United is a different discussion. Mm-hmm. He probably would have been better than Manuel Ugarte, but he wasn't really a holding midfielder the way Manuel Ugarte was. Where would you fit him in this midfield? I don't know. You need to have a bad, desperate need for a defensive midfielder that wants to be a defensive midfielder, not someone that they're trying to turn into one, and is willing to do some of the ugly stuff, but has the technique. I mean, if you look at Roy Keane was a defensive midfielder, but his passing ability was magnificent. You have to be able to pass. You have to be comfortable in possession. A lot of times you're the first ball out from defense. I mean, how many times did we see him pre-Carrick giving the ball away when the ball's played into him in midfield? He would turn left, turn right, give the ball away, constantly get dispossessed in key areas of the pitch. A defensive midfielder that can't pass the ball is a total liability. And there'll never be a moment that Manuel Ugarte gets to a level where he's good enough to play for Manchester United.
Yeah, it's a terrible shame. And
I wish it wasn't the case. I feel bad for the lad. I really do. I would like to see him be at that level, but this is one. He doesn't survive at Real Madrid or anything like that. There's just no way, and that's the standard United they have to judge themselves by.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has to. You have to look at it in that standard that it's not personal, it's business, because ultimately that's what it is. And if you're in the engine room at Manchester United and you're not there, ultimately there's you have to be able to dictate matters either in defense, in attack, or if you're truly special, on both ends of the field. That's what made Keno so fantastic when you're mentioning him. Keno is one of the most underrated ball progressing players. His distribution was far better than people gave him credit for. It's just instead of trying the Hollywood pass, he always just tried the simple pass. And sometimes the simple pass is the best possible pass.
Yeah.
And it lies in as well what you're saying with Scott McTominay. People, they use, it's not a fair comparison, because what McTominay is doing in Italy, he wouldn't be able to come in and marshal a two-man midfield at Manchester United. He's fantastic at crashing into the boxes in that running man, and his finishing is great, but it's not the same conversation. I mean, Manchester United got rid of Scott McTominay to bring in Manuel Ugarte. When you look at it in that sense, it seems like an incredibly foolish decision. But they're not similar players in any way, shape, or form. And as I said to you previously, when you are building your midfield, you are building how you want your team to play football. And you have to choose players that are stylistic in that sense for whatever way you want to be able to demand playing football and moving forward. That leads to another question that came through from Niall Healy. And he said, if we signed Bruno Guimaraes, does this show that the club feels like we could push the league next season? It strikes me as a win now rather than develop signing. Also, would we be happy with just Bruno Guimaraes and Baleba brought into the midfield?
Yeah, these are really good questions, because, what would concern me about Baleba is he hasn't shown this season that he's the obvious answer. And United can't afford to get the Baleba decision wrong. And if you're going to spend that type of money on a player, there is no such thing as certainty with any human being. You just don't know. But how many £100 million footballers work out, Shaun?
I know.
I mean, it's almost none of them.
Yeah, especially in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, and so I'm going to myself, okay, it's a big ticket for a player that hasn't shown he's worth that type of money. Guimaraes is going to cost an awful lot too, because he's a Premier League footballer and Newcastle don't have to sell him. Very good player. He's Premier League ready. What is he, about 26 now?
Bruno?
Yeah, Guimaraes.
Bruno's closer to 29.
Oh, 29. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, well, he's 25, 26 when he signed up from Lyon. At 29, Shaun,
You see, I think this question is
not getting any
very,
better than
very
what he
good.
is right now. This, and then we're talking about replacing Bruno Fernandes at 31, right? Do we need a midfielder that we're going to look to replace in 2 years?
You see, on the whole, when you look at it and you consider what Ineos's transfer philosophy is and what they're trying to build, it's sign young and be able to build a team for the next decade, per se. You look at a player like Bruno, going on 29 years of age, I believe. Newcastle don't need to sell him. You're talking about, what, 80, 90 million pounds. But Niall makes a very good point, because if you bring him into this Manchester United field and you have Baleba in reserve, then all of a sudden you're looking at a starting 11, everybody remaining injury free, that consists of Bruno and Mainu in midfield, with Carlos Baleba to be able to come on and to impact proceedings from the bench. Now that looks directly at what you were referencing with Carrick earlier on, that maybe he has desires and he has intentions to be able to change a game mid-game. He doesn't have the ability to be able to do so. Now, all of a sudden, if you have a situation where you have Maino and Bruno in midfield with our own Bruno Fernandes there as well, and you want to change things up with about 30 minutes, or you want to shore things up, then you've got Carlos Baleba coming in, and he doesn't have the pressure of being Manchester United's 100 million you need to perform right now signing. It gives him a couple of years with Bruno Guimaraes at the club to be able to come to terms with the fact that there is expectations while you're here. And maybe it is that golden ticket that we looked at that Rasmus Højlund didn't have when he came, by having an experienced striker beside him. Maybe bringing both of them in, even though it would be extortionate value to, like, the transfer fee would be huge when you're considering both of them. Maybe it presents an alternative option to bring Baleba forward in a way that removes the pressure off him.
Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult. I mean, look, one thing we'll say about Guimaraes, we're talking about giving Casemiro an extra year, and Casemiro's about turned 35.
Yeah.
So maybe we're being unfair to Guimaraes. United need to replace Casemiro's goals either throughout the team or with someone that offers that type of return, which Guimaraes does. So all depends. If is 2 players enough? Because United will also have to replace Ugarte. I think that your starting 11, of course, has to be good enough, but you need 3 or 4 players on the bench that you can come on that are of similar level to the players you have. United will have a lot more games next season that gives you confidence you can control and keep hold of a game. What we're talking about with Ugarte isn't necessarily the start. The team that's starting. It's the team that it's the squad. And so United are going to have to, in my opinion, go out and get more than 2 midfielders. They're already short in midfield. If, Casemiro goes, which looks likely, looks like United have got a deal done for Maguire and Kobbie Mainoo, which is great. But they're going to need to replace Ugarte as well. And so is 2 players enough?
Yeah, well, this is exactly on line with another question that came through from Andros Stauman. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's Andros Stauman. And he says, is it realistic to suggest that United buy 3 midfielders in the summer? Or should they aim to push through one of the academy central midfielders? Yeah. A hypothetical quartet of Connolly, Mainu, Baleba, and one of the Fletchers, Thwaites, or Kones sounds interesting. And that is a viable option as well, because at what point is an academy midfielder ready if you're never going to give them an opportunity, Phil?
Yeah, this is true. But how do you get them an opportunity? We can't guess that they're ready, because you just don't know how they're going to perform at that level and deal with things that don't get answered at youth football. You try to narrow the jump, between levels, which is why the championship is so important. You get to see how young players deals with pressure every week, deals with crowds every week, deals with and deals with competition within a squad, deals with all the things that comes with playing every single week. And if they can't match that, they can't do that, you don't bear the consequences. It's a big, massive ask to take a young player from youth football into a club like United and say, okay, we tried this with Toby Collier and stuff. It's such a massive jump, and it's sometimes you can ruin a career doing that. So if United have a player that's close to being ready to do that right now, he should be coming on instead of Manuel Ugarte.
Yeah, I would agree. But I do also think that there's massive credence in this, especially when you consider the financial situation at the club and the importance to deal with the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. If you bring in like
What's the point of adhering to them anyway?
Evidently so, it's only the smaller clubs get penalised by all accounts. But if you're bringing in someone like Andros mentioned Tonali instead of Bruno, so if you're bringing in a Tonali and a Baleba and you have Kobbie Mainoo, and then you have the younger lads coming through, it is feasible to look at a situation because you have two central midfielders whereby you have Mainoo and whoever, Tonali, just for that example. You have Baleba on the bench. You have another young lad on the bench like Kone. But then you have players who are still contracted at the club when they're not injured, like Mason Mount, who possess the attributes and the capabilities to fall in and do a job if required in midfield. I'm not talking about Mount being the midfield option for a dozen games. I'm talking about him being able to come on for 30 minutes to be able to add some technical additions inside in the midfield. And something like that is feasible. And that presents the avenue whereby you could look at the academy and you could say someone like Coney or one of the Fletchers to get them 10 minutes here or 15 minutes there. And then all of a sudden they become the option and you're saving money and being able to invest it elsewhere into the squad. Because ultimately, Phil, look, I know it's very difficult to know if a player is going to be able to make that jump and the leap from academy into senior game. But Manchester United is the walking, talking definition of a football club that aspires to build these players out to be able to do that.
Yeah, we're talking about Kone here, but to me that's not commensurate with reality, Shaun. I was just looking at his stats here for Lausanne. He's barely playing. I mean, if he's barely playing on loan at Lausanne, how on earth can we be sitting here talking about him as a potential to be a Manchester United midfielder next season? Like,
but he's only one. There's. I mean, you're also looking at you're looking at the Fletchers. You're looking at the Fletchers, Jack Moorhouse, those guys, you know.
Yeah, but they're at the club right now. Like, I mean, this is what I'm saying. If Carrick right now is looking at Manuel Ugarte as a better option than them in the immediate, I would be concerned about that. Whether they're ready, and Michael Carrick knows a midfielder when he sees one. Then maybe Michael Carrick thinks they're better players, but just it's the mental aspect in the moment that is very possible too. That this is the wrong time to bring young players in. I don't know, but I do agree that he's going to have to look at the academy next season because there's no way United are going to be able to go out and recruit all the solutions to problems that they need. Look, United badly need, in my opinion, a right back, and Diogo Dalot has survived year after year because United have had 5 or 6 other pressing needs and haven't got to that. United have to be in a position this summer where right back is something they address because Diogo Dalot is not good enough to. You can see every week the consequences of United not being good enough in certain areas. It shows up every single week. How many times I've seen Dalot give the ball away on the right, led to goals, or not scoring a ball that was a tap-in for a striker and then United lose a game. But this is exactly, you can draw a straight parallel line between a right back that's not good enough and what they cost you in the moment. It's blatantly obvious. Then that has to get addressed. So to me, whatever you need to do this summer, a right back has to be on that list.
Yeah, it's something I was actually looking at earlier today as well, that Dalot has started 9 of the 10 games for Carrick. Mazraoui only came in for one of them, and that was Newcastle.
Was he injured?
He was injured for a few of them, but he was available for a few of them as well.
Well, he was out again, wasn't he?
Pardon?
He was out against Bournemouth.
Yeah, he was ill against Bournemouth, yeah.
Mm.
But he did return to the bench against Villa, and he was available against Villa as well. So Dalot seems to be showing something to an awful lot of people at the football club that he's the man to come in and play it right back. But
always that footballer that, to my eyes and to lots of other fans, just looks absolutely dross. What gets picked every week, and you're going, I don't know what these people obviously know more about football than me, but I don't know what they see. Clearly, they have a different appraisal, but it's bizarre to me because when I look at Dalot, I'm going, that guy is not good enough to play for Manchester United every single week. He's just not.
And evidently he continues to do so. But Mark Cheevers sent a question through asking, how do United spin making Michael Carrick permanent manager if, as we expect, they approach Enrique and get rebuffed? This is important as Nevin Co. have rightly demanded we go out and get the best in class. If they pretend Carrick was only the only man in frame, that could lead to issues for him down the line. It's a valid concern.
Well, it goes back to the Eric Ten Hag thing. How can you interview a bunch of other managers when you have a manager and then come back to your manager and say, actually, you're the guy because the other guy's turned it down? I understand the point. There's two ways of looking at that. If I'm Carrick, you can feel offended, or you can say, well, in many ways, it justifies me having the job. The fact that you've looked at all these other candidates and decided I'm the best. Now, obviously, that doesn't apply if Luis Enrique rebuffs United and then they go back to Carrick. It's a tricky game. I agree. But I think if United get a denial from Luis Enrique, they'll get a denial from Enrique long before they sit down and talk to him. They'll get that denial through intermediaries. And it'll most always be about the reason why Tuchel turned them down. It's about what control do I have? What signings am I getting? And that type of thing. And I think that you'll usually get a rebuttal, or you get rebuff, sorry, long before it becomes public knowledge that you're in discussions with them. But I do believe United should speak to other candidates outside of Carrick.
Yeah, well, I was speaking with individuals that I speak to every week at Carrington this morning, and I posted quite a comprehensive piece on this. The news and the information that I'm getting this morning is that the club have categorically not spoken with any other manager for this summer. Now, it's not a situation that they're not looking at other managers. It'd be so utterly preposterous to think that they're not. There's a short list there, and the names are clear. The names are obvious, but I think there's some names that would surprise people as well. The biggest message that I'm getting is that Carrick has exceeded the predetermined expectations that he was given in coming into the football club. And as a result, there is a reevaluation of what is being considered. And that's to be expected. But as a supporter and as a logical football supporter, not just a Manchester United supporter, you would think that a best-in-class sporting hierarchy would be considering every single avenue and keeping all their options open, just as they would with individual players like in midfield. And it's something we've discussed numerous times. They want Elliot Anderson. If they can't get him, who is number two, and are we going to get him straight away so as he can acclimatise into the squad during the pre-season and not be waiting 2 months and announcing him 3 days before we open the Premier League season? These things are important. And there's 2 questions that came through, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to amalgamate them because they're more or less similar. Dro came through on Twitter and said, we have to think game by game, but how confident are we of securing Champions League football? And if so, what positions do you think we will address? But Jason Anderson also came through and said, is the club considering perhaps making centre-back alongside midfield a priority? With Lissandro Martinez and delayed injury records, it would be prudent to do so. Yeah. And the reason that I think it's important to address both of them, obviously it's a double-barrel question from Dro. We got to think game by game, but how confident are we securing Champions League? And then he goes on to the different positions. And I think centre-back is something that is popping up more and more. And it's probably more so got to do with the fact that nobody has an iota of how long Matthias de Ligt is going to be out for.
Yeah, and I think that you have to assume that Matthias de Ligt is going to have a similar career trajectory as Mason Mount, and that it's going to be this until he runs out his contract at United. It's centre back. You need continuity. You need consistency. You need a pair. You need people that 34 weeks out of 38. They're going to be available. Matthias de Ligt was probably United's best player up until about November. And then, of course, picked up this injury. And, all the diagnoses are completely nebulous. You don't know when he's going to be back. We have no idea. And, it's the same with Mason Mount. Mason Mount come on the weekend. But Michael Carrick had been saying since February, he's going to be back in a couple of days. This is really unfortunate for these players. But, when you're talking about constantly evaluating to borrow an American phrase, bang for your buck, to what you're getting for your money, can you justify that? Can you justify Mason Mount can't be given a new contract, Shaun? No. You have to assume that this is going to be his continued career trajectory, and that's just not justifiable. When Matthias de Ligt, it's really, really sad. This has been persistent throughout his career. Now, these are not, we talked about this last week, these shouldn't have come as a massive surprise, because these are problems that dogged these players before they came to United. And, it's one of the reasons why they were able to get them at beneath market value of what they would be, commensurate with how their ability is. So this is something that is extremely unfortunate. And look, if United don't qualify for the Champions League at this point, we'll not need to worry about whether Carrick's going to get the job or not, because he most certainly won't. And what we talked about, if you look at last season, they were saying, what will Champions League qualification result in, or what will it cost United? They said maybe it'll cost us one player in the summer, right? I believe it's a lot more consequential than that. So United will be in Europe next season. If they don't qualify for the Champions League, the mood around the football club will be chaotic, and we'll be looking at a whole different summer, because everything that Michael Carrick's done up until this point will be forgotten, and United will have to completely revise their shopping list.
Yeah, in a roundabout way of looking at it, Carrick could fall victim to his own success here. Because if he had come into the club and he had stabilized everything that was going on, we started playing this good football and ultimately got us into a position whereby we earned Europa League football. That certainly didn't look like that was going to be the case, particularly when he finished 15th last season. But as we've routinely said, Phil, when you get yourself into a position where you're now there, and particularly with how far off Chelsea and Liverpool have fallen, anything but Champions League qualification feels like just total failure. And the question was, how confident are you in securing Champions League? I got to be honest, I am quite confident in securing it now, regardless of individual injury issues. I am quite confident in securing it. I know we have to go to Chelsea and Liverpool have to come to Old Trafford, but I don't think that there's going to be issues in those particular games. I saw the MEN actually put something up earlier on. Well, I didn't see it directly from the MEN. I saw it was aggregated by somebody, that they're saying United need 10 points from the remaining fixtures to guarantee Champions League football.
It's hard to say, because the teams beneath them just don't have the consistency. I think, United or Villa should. I mean, Villa had an important one at the weekend against West Ham. It's hard to say whether that's reflective of, anything that would give you confidence going forward, and whether that's going to be Aston Villa back where they have some level of consistency, because you should beat West Ham.
Yeah, but you're beating a team that are third from bottom, like.
Yeah, but you look at the rest of them and you're going, Liverpool look like they're going to get beat every week. They beat Galatasaray, but I'm talking about in the Premier League. They look like they're made of chocolate. And Chelsea are their own mess. So where's the challenge coming from?
It's almost qualification by the nature of your circumstances and situations around you. Well, what exactly do you think has happened with Slot? Do you think Slot is totally incapable of actually just replicating it, or do you think this is the byproduct of certain key members in the squad aging, like Salah and whatnot?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to follow Klopp, and you have to give him credit. I mean, he won the league, which I did not think he would do. What's happening now, I thought would have happened a lot sooner. You go out in the summer, you bring in all your own players, you bring in people that completely change the dynamic of a dressing room. And, I think obviously there's been some hangover from Jota. I think it's hard to predict and scale the impact of that on people and what that does to, the inside of a changing room. I mean, there's no question there's an impact on that. But, I mean, I think that one of the difficulties, I don't want to nationally stereotype here, but when you get a situation inside a football club that requires a certain type of character, maybe empathy, love, compassion, that type of thing. There's going to be people bristling listening to this, but the type that needs the arm around the shoulder, I'm not 100% sure that the Dutch personality is conducive to that. Because I have first-hand experience of this. But but it's they have a certain characteristic about them that everything's very functional and very is automaticity and not the most loving type of personality, and that's
Do
okay.
you mean to tell me? Do you mean to tell me now that you have forgotten the scenes at Wembley with Eric Ten Hag putting his arm around
Yeah.
Garnacho and Menu and looking at them like he was a loving, proud father? Have you forgotten
Listen,
that?
my former father-in-law, when I'm divorced now, but born and raised in Amsterdam, I could ask him where his 1973 tax return is, and he could go find it. Boom, everything is by the. But you need an arm around the shoulder. Get the fuck out. But that's okay. I love him dearly, great guy. But they have a certain characteristic, personality about that, and I'm sure it doesn't apply to every Dutchman. I'm sure it's not the case but everyone. But I just think that when it comes to, I think Klopp was a bit more endearing that way, where he's someone you could love. I mean, if Klopp was United manager, I would have loved him, right? And he had charisma, right? I hate to use that word, but I don't think Ten Hag had it, and I don't think Slot had it. I think they're a bit one-dimensional in certain terms of their mood. But I think that matters when it comes to managing people.
Yeah. And also when you're coming out and speaking publicly to the press and complaining that rival tacticians have not played the way that you have set up for them to play all week. I mean, you're kind of losing a lot of credibility with yourself there.
With your own players, by the way, Shaun. Your own players hear that and go, that's weak.
Yeah, 100% it is. Well, I think now we've had a pretty long, decent chat here today, all things considered. We got through plenty of questions there as well. It's going to be rather difficult to pull talking points out of such a prolonged period of play without Manchester United in the field, but I'm sure we'll be able to get together next week and talk about whatever the hell surfaces its head between here and there, Phil, won't we?
We'll be back. No problems. We'll find something to blabble about. I'm sure United will find some way of making sure this is not a quiet 2.5 weeks. Right? I'm sure there'll be tons of stuff that will come up, and there'll be lots of stuff to cover. But thanks again to all of you for downloading the podcast, for tweeting your questions and getting involved. It's much appreciated.
Likewise, I echo all of that. And as always, Phil, fantastic spending some time with you, chatting. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in once more. You were all very much loved. And look, the feedback has been great. We're glad you're enjoying it, and we're enjoying delivering all of the messages that you have and all the questions. So keep them coming, and we will talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Thanks, folks. Cheers, Shaun.
See you.